everyone, Mr. Evans here with your pre-recorded lesson for Unit 8, Lesson 7. This is our last pre-recorded live lesson of the school year. Yay! Almost there. We will probably have a couple more live lessons to go over portfolios and last minute stuff, but this is the last pre-recorded live lesson. So, that being said, the material in this lesson has been gone over like 2 or 3 times in a previous lesson. So rather than just hash it out again, we're going to go over the quick check questions on Unit 8, Lesson 11, which is the quick check for this. So we're just going to kind of go down the list, and I'm going to go over why the incorrect answers are not correct and go over why the correct answers are correct. And it's important you listen to all of that because a lot of these questions are reworded and rehashed on the Unit 8 test as well as the final. So don't just see, you can see which is the correct one because it's highlighted there in yellow, but don't just click through and click the correct answers. Listen to the explanations because these questions are reworded in the Unit 8 test and in the final, so that might be important for you. So here we go, the quick check questions for Unit 8, Lesson 11. Which statement is true? Fossils can provide information about when life forms existed. Fossils can provide information about the entire evolutionary process of life forms. Fossils cannot provide information about relatedness of life forms. Fossils cannot provide information about life cycles and behaviors. So let's go over the wrong ones first. Fossils can indeed provide information about life cycles and behaviors. Where are the fossils located? Are they located next to another dead animal that maybe they were preying upon? Can you check their claws, their teeth, their body structure? It tells you what they ate. You can check if there are smaller fossils of the same species next to them to see if their young stayed with them until they got older, all that kind of stuff. Okay, fossils cannot provide evidence about the relatedness of life forms. Well, that one's not true either. Fossils can provide that information for the same reasons we just went over. Fossils can provide information about the entire evolutionary process of life forms. Well, that's not true because a fossil is just a snapshot of one moment in time, one species at one particular period. It does not tell the entire story. But the one that is true, fossils can provide information about when life forms existed. The location of where the fossil is buried, how deep down a paleontologist had to dig to find it, what type of rock is the fossil located in, comparison with other species found in the same layer of rock. Yes, the fossil can provide that information of when the life form existed. So the first one is true on this question. Next question. Based on the phylogeny shown above, you can conclude that species 4 is the most closely related to species, and it's asking you which one is it closely related to. So if you remember from the phylogenetic tree, the closer a species is on the evolutionary tree, it's just going to be physically located on the picture, the closest. So 1 is like the oldest species, so it's furthest away from 4. And as you move closer, they are more closely related. So this one's kind of, you can just kind of look at it. It's just like looking at a family tree. Are you more closely related to your grandmother or your great 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 grandmother? It's the same kind of concept. You're more closely related to your grandmother. So the correct answer for this one is 3, just because it's closest on the tree. Now you might want to say 5. We're going to go over this wrong answer. You might want to say 5 because it is more physically close to this. But if you look at the nodes here, you can see right here on this node, this was the branch point. There was some species here that branched off into 2 separate species at this point. Now you have to go all the way back down to here, to this branch point, to find the common ancestor between 4 and 5. You'd have to go down the evolutionary tree here to this species, and then you'd have to go back to this species and then go here. So yeah, they're more closely related just by looking at the picture, but you have to look at the branch points and see how far back you would have to go to find a common ancestor between 4 and 5. And you got to go like all the way back here. This is really old. This one is more recent. It's closer on the tree. So 3 is the correct answer for this one. Next question. For decades, scientists relied on the fossil record and comparative anatomy to assemble evolutionary lineages. Which statement describes a limitation on these methods? So the question is just asking, back in the day before DNA technology and genetic technology had been developed, scientists really only had the fossil record to use to compare extinct species with each other. And that worked okay for the time, but it was not a complete picture, but you work with what you have at the time. So it's asking what is a limitation of just being able to use fossils to compare extinct species and determine how they're related in terms of evolution. So let's go over the incorrect answers first. They are not reliable evidence of how the body structures of organisms evolved. Well, they are. Fossils are reliable evidence. It's a fossil. You can see their body structure. You can compare bones shape. So they were able to do that. They cannot be used to determine when species evolved. Again, yes, they could. You can use fossils to determine when a species existed, what time period they were in, based on where they're found in the rock layer. They are no longer relevant because the fossil record is complete. Okay, that's not true. The fossil record is not complete, and it never will be complete because we will never find a fossil for every single organism that has ever lived on planet Earth. That's just not going to happen. There are probably species where a fossil of it just doesn't even exist anymore. It takes a very specific set of circumstances for a fossil to be made. So the fossil record is not complete. So, but what the correct answer is they can show false relationships between organisms that are not reflected in the DNA. So you could conceivably find fossils from 2 different organisms that look very similar just on the surface. For example, a shark and a dolphin. If you found fossils from a shark, which is actually very difficult because sharks have cartilage, but I digress. But if you found a fossil of a shark and a dolphin, some like ancient old species of shark and dolphin, you could make the mistake that they were very closely related. But they're not as closely related as it might first appear. But if you can get into the DNA of those organisms, you could see that they are more distantly separated on the evolutionary tree than the fossils might suggest. So this is the correct answer on question 3. All right, last question. Moving on. Which statement about evolution is accurate? So let's go over the incorrect ones first. Animals, plants, and microbes have their own separate, unrelated ancestries. Well, that's not true. That's not accurate because everything on the planet is related if you go back far enough. Everything comes from a distinct common ancestor, so everything on the planet has a related ancestry if you go back far enough. So that's not right. Scientists no longer study evolution because it has been proven. There is no such thing in science of proving something beyond all conceivable doubt. Science is always improving, always making new discoveries, always finding new relationships. So science is never 100% beyond a doubt accurate. That's not what science is. Science tries to get 99.99999% accurate, knowing it's never going to be 100% accurate, because if you're 100% accurate, there is absolutely no need to continue to study and research. You just stop and you're like, oh, I got it, I win, the end. No, that's not how it works. Scientists are always studying evolution, always finding new relationships, always improving the theory, and always coming up with new methods and techniques to use evolution to improve the human condition. So that one's not right. DNA is the only extant evidence supporting the theory of evolution. That's not true either. There's all kinds of evidence supporting the theory of evolution. Not only DNA, you've got fossils, you've got comparative embryology, you've got stuff in the rock record, you've got behavioral stuff and geographical stuff. There's all kinds of other things supporting evolution. So the accurate statement on here is living things have adapted and changed over time for specific discoverable reasons. When a life form adapts, mutates, changes, evolves over time, it's for a reason. There are actually periods over time called punctuated equilibrium. I don't know if the lessons ever went over that. But punctuated equilibrium is a long period of time where there is no evolutionary change. Things just kind of sit and stew. Nothing really happens. And that's because there's no evolutionary pressure. The environment's cool, the balance is cool, there's just not a whole lot of pressure to adapt and change and evolve. But that does not last forever. Periods of punctuated equilibrium don't last forever. Eventually, something's going to happen to spur an adaptation. Natural selection is always happening, always working. Sometimes it works slow, sometimes it works faster. But the accurate statement, the correct one, is living things have adapted and changed over time for specific discoverable reasons. Okay, so that is it for today's pre-recorded live lesson. Thank you everyone for watching our live lessons over the semester. Me and Miss Nordquist will have a couple more live lessons this week before the end of the school year, so we hope to see you all there at the live lessons. But if not, have a fantastic summer, and keep an eye out for important webmails about completing outstanding assignments, about potential alternate assignments and extra credit, because those become very, very important in the last couple weeks of school. So contact us if you have any questions. And just a reminder, the last day of school for students is May 17th. All right, everyone have a fantastic day.